Hi, I'm Kipp Corbus. I'm a clinical psychologist who's been helping people navigate and achieve change for years, but like everybody else, I'm trying to figure it out myself as well.
Hello, and welcome to the Redirect Podcast, where we have spirited conversations and tell stories about finding purpose in retirement. For us, retirement isn't an ending, it's a beginning. Time to redirect your energy, wisdom, and passion toward new horizons. Whether you've recently retired or planning for that transition, or are years into this journey, this podcast is your companion in navigating this meaningful chapter of life. So welcome, guys, to another Redirect Podcast. Today we're going to learn a lot about us and what makes us tick. As we say, we're not experts at managing processes of retirement, but we are experts on who we are, or are we?
I'm not.
Have you ever met with a psychologist? Or are you willing to share your experience if you did?
I totally have. I'm a huge proponent of therapy in general. I think if you have the capacity to, there's benefit in doing it, even if you perceive yourself to be healthy, so to speak, or I don't have any problems. I'm a huge proponent of professional help if you have the capacity to engage in it. It was really beneficial to me in times when I was in critical need. So yeah, I'm a big fan.
Curt?
I have. I'm a suppressor. You know, things happen in my life, I bury it. There was a moment in my life, not too long ago actually, where, you know, my parents died within 14 months of one another, and that was big. And then I had my brother-in-law passed away tragically in an automobile accident, and that was sort of like the camel that just sort of broke the back. You know, I just that brought me down, and I was dark. I got depressed. I was all over the place. So I ended up meeting with somebody, and we talked about a lot of things. It felt good to talk. I still ask the question, okay, when is it your turn to sort of talk to me and tell me what I'm saying and, you know, give me something back here. It's, you know, okay, yeah, I had this problem. Yeah, I have that problem. Yeah, but I want to hear from you. But we had a good conversation, and I was able to get a lot of things out of my head and a lot of things off my heart. And it got to the point where I said to the psychologist I was working with, I'm like, so where's this going from now, right from now? And he goes, well, you tell me. And I'm like, okay. And I said, all right, I'm feeling okay, and I don't necessarily know if I need to come back. He says, well, that's fine. If you feel okay, then you feel okay. If you need to call me, feel free to call me. And I'm like, all right. But it helped. And I have to admit, I had that moment of time where I just thought about it. There was a lot of darkness, and it felt so good to unload and to talk about things that I suppressed over years. And it was cool. What about you, Dale?
You know, I did. Years ago, I was in a very short marriage, and in the period of 1 month, decided to leave that marriage, change jobs, and move homes, or buy and sell a house in one place and bought and sold a house in another.
Like all of the critical life points, all in a very short
There wasn't a death in the family. That was one I was missing.
Yeah.
Other than that, this
through 'em all.
was, and he said, well, you're on I-71 going north, changing lanes left and right. Probably really good that you need, and I said, I think I need a pro with me, you know, just to kind of figure this out, because there were a lot of decisions. And I said, I feel like I've just gone down to the bottom. I'm into clean out mode. I need help. And did that for 9 months and did more counseling, actually, when I got on ADHD medicine, and did it with a group, a professional group that handles adults with ADD, and had a counselor through that as I learned how to successfully manage my ADHD, because it was at the time that I started a business and I needed to have some focus, and helped me through that for a couple of years.
I'm really glad that we have experience with that kind of professional help, because that's not very common amongst people our age, especially your age.
There he goes again, Dale. There he goes again.
There seems to be a minor or mild generational barrier for folks in the older spectrum that are comfortable with seeking out that kind of
I
professional.
think it's a pride thing. Yeah. I think somebody just, I don't need that. I can deal with it. It's all right. Just, I'm going to wipe off all this dirt.
Rub some dirt on it.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Yeah.
Well, today's friend of Redirect is Kipp Corbus. Kipp is a licensed clinical psychologist with nearly 2 decades of experience helping leaders grow and thrive. Over the past 19 years, he's worked as an executive coach and organizational development consultant across both the federal government and private sector, supporting individuals and teams through big transitions. Focus on big transitions for us today, for sure, but also leadership challenges and cultural shifts. He currently serves as an adjunct professor in the doctoral psychology program at Xavier University. He's previously taught at the University of Cincinnati's Center for Organizational Leadership. Kipp, we're glad you're here. Looking forward to unpacking some of these things as they help us focus in on retirement and what we might be able to, how apply some of those disciplines and thought processes and perspectives in retirement. We're glad you're here.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, a transition. I'm going to jump right into it. There's transition in all of our lives and all the time. And again, we're using the platform of retirement because that's what the Redirect podcast is all about. But I'm sure all of the information that we're going to be talking about is relevant regardless of your age. And my comment is this transition from career where you have all this purpose, what your identity is potentially in that world, and then you come into something that's completely different. What's the general aspect about psychologically what we go through in a transition?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. And just listening to what you all were just discussing for a little bit shows all the variation, all the different transitions that happen throughout your life. So a lot of it depends on the person. And I think that's the unique part about psychology. That's the unique part about coaching. Every person's different. Every person perceives it differently. So the same situation can be seen as really positive and exciting or really scary and daunting. So a couple of things. I'll start with the negative first. So you can look at the past and say, oh, look at all this regret. Why am I here? What caused this? What about the regret? What didn't I do? What could I have done? There's what happens, where am I at now, and some of that upward comparison. Where should I be? Why am I not as good or successful as that person? And then what happens a lot with transition, there's a lot of unknown. I do that with organizations, do that with people. The change that's happening, the biggest, scariest part of it is what is unknown and what you don't know is going to happen. And again, that can be really positive for people, but seeing that unknown, a lot of times what people can go to with the negative, with what's unknown, it's usually filled in with negatives. This is going to be bad, or a lot of times it can be filled in with those negative thoughts versus the excitement.
We had a guest on earlier, Stephanie Atkinson, who's a life coach, and she made a comment about how thoughts can impact your life. I think what you're saying, if you place a thought out in front of you that is negative, then all of a sudden you're in a negative world as opposed to what you need to do. Is that safe?
100%. So cognitive behavioral therapy is a very common type of therapy and a technique for therapy. And it's all about how your thoughts and feelings impact your actions and behaviors. And the thoughts you have, the reframing you do. So like I said before, it can be seen as a negative. Somebody can also see transition as this is exciting. So let's look at all those past. So looking at the past, look at all these cool things that I've done, all these accomplishments I've had, all these things I've learned, and this is where I'm at now because of all those things. It can look at this, I'm in a great spot, there's all these positive things going on in my life, and I'm really happy with what's going on in the present. And in the future, oh man, what else can happen? What can we look for? What's going to come out? This is exciting to discover and learn new things and be there. How you think about it, you can take the exact same situation and take all those negative thoughts or those positive thoughts. And it's shifting that is what psychology and cognitive behavioral therapy.
That's what you do.
Yeah, we recently had at one of our camps a couple's speakers, and they've got some books out and they're very successful. They suggested that psychology's studies suggest that like 80%, like 81% of all of the thoughts we have, especially about ourselves, are negative. Does that align with your professional assessment?
Yeah, I don't know the exact stats. I think that's an interesting stat. People are hard on themselves.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, people don't give themselves the grace, the support that they need to. A lot of what I do in coaching is helping leaders say, let's look at some of the positives. They say, I just had a conversation with somebody this morning, said, I'm a failure. This isn't working.
Yep.
Everything's a failure. I'm like, is everything a failure? Let's look at that and see what some of those positive things you've done. People, leaders particularly, are hard on themselves. People in general are hard on themselves. And they do a lot more upward comparison, regret, all those negatives. I think that's a natural tendency. And having somebody supportive to talk about that can help you balance that and shift away from that a little bit.
We did something at our workplace when I was running my company and decided to try something, and that was start the weekly meeting on Monday with everything that went well the week before. And we just called it wins.
Yep.
Yeah,
We want to
successes
talk
and
wins. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And focus everybody on, because you don't. Because you think about everything that went wrong. And that's just a human thing, and recognizing that when you have time in a transition period like retirement or redirecting, I think all of a sudden you have something called time to think. And what you fill that space with becomes pretty indicative of where you're going to go with your life in this new environment.
Yeah.
And I think it's probably what a lot of people experience is having that time. Would you?
Oh, yeah. So when I'm coaching people, I will say, pause for a second. I do not want to hear anything about what you need to do for your team. I don't want to hear anything about what you need to do better. Just sit here for a minute. Well, we use 360 feedback, 360 assessments where they get feedback from bosses, peers, and staff. And I say, read the positive. So one part is to list off qualitative comments of what's the positive things about this leader. Is it just pause? I don't want to hear anything else, and I'll stop them if they do. Just let's stay there and look at that. And it's really helpful for them, and it's not something they always do. The other thing, Dale, just like you're saying, one of my favorite, most basic activities to do with a group when I'm starting with them is think of one thing you're proud of. I don't care if it's personal, professional life, what's one thing you're proud of, and just share it. And that is, people don't get to do that and brag that often and think about what they actually did positively. And I think it's just giving yourself that time and space to do it.
You know, when I was in the work world and working with people that we all worked in the same business together, I'd take time with them, and they'd always be coming with the problem, right? It's always the problem. And I would use the visual picture of the stock market. I'm like, if you look at the stock market on an hourly basis,
It's chaotic.
it is up and down and all over the place and nuts. And then if you back out a little bit further, it calms down. But then you look at it after a 2-year time period, you see a nice trend line that's sort of going
and the
up.
10-year is even more smooth.
Exactly. And the aspect is that we get so bogged down into the thing that's happening in the here and now without necessarily reflecting and taking yourself above it to say, all these points. Remember the good things. Remember what you're good at. Remember that you took it from here to here. Okay, we've got this bump in the road right now. Breathe. And now let's move forward, because we're going to look back on this and it's going to be a part of our growth. So should I be a psychologist after that, Kipp?
Absolutely.
Oh, wow.
You can advise me on stocks too.
Yeah.
So we
don't do any of that.
we often we have run into some things having this podcast that have been really impactful, and one of them is identity. It's when somebody all of a sudden transitions, but you're searching for, who am I? What do I want to be? And it's really powerful, because for people that are just retiring, a lot of times they've identified themselves as that job that they did for the last 30 years, and all of a sudden they don't have that. It's what's left. How should people approach trying to identify your identity?
Yeah, no, it's a great question. I mean, think about it. When you're meeting somebody at a party or doing small talk, the first question is really easy. What do you do?
What do you do?
And
Or even if you ask them, tell me about yourself, they will say what they do.
yeah, I'm an engineer. I'm a social worker. I'm a marketing expert. Whatever. That's how you identify yourself.
Right.
And I've heard you guys talk about it in the podcast. Everything you are doing every day is about, it's your livelihood. So it is a big part of you. It's how you support yourself, your family, whoever.
Big portion of your time.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, we talk about the majority of your time is spent at work. And yeah, so that identity is that it's both for survival and well-being, and it just and based on time, it's who you are.
I have something to visualize. I'm a visualize guy. All right. So when we're a young kid in school, we have these expectations placed on us by our teachers. As we get older, there are expectations that our parents placed on us. As we go to college and then get a job, there's other expectations that are placed on this that we are striving for, that we work toward, and that sort of molds and creates an identity. Is that a safe analogy point?
Yeah. Oh, I think every experience you have is part of your story. So one of the things I love about psychology, and it was the first thing I learned going through grad school and my first therapy clients, everybody's got a story. The best realization I had, I was working, it was a 24/7 hold where kids who are suicidal go and stay for safety and to get to the care, to get to the point. And I heard some of the stories of these kids, of the background, the family, the lack of structure, the significant issues that occurred. I'm like, no wonder you're in this tough spot hearing that story. Mm-hmm. So that's a more extreme version, but everybody, one of the things I love about this work that I do, you intimately get to hear people's story. That's all you're doing. Mm-hmm. So there's not a set answer because everybody's story is a little different, but what we do, and you hear people's story, you learn about what shaped them from childhood to now to different experiences, and that's what guides you.
But where I'm going with this too is that these expectations that we place on ourselves to create our identity, because that's, as one of our guests said, a scaffolding of life. Yep. Now when I'm getting into retirement, I don't have a boss anymore. I'm not even doing it to the degree with my wife and family because the providing aspect has gone off the table. I think there's a loss of identity because all of a sudden it's like, well, who am I? Who am I supposed to, what expectations am I supposed to be meeting?
Who's setting those expectations?
That to me is, in the retirement part, it's like, okay, there's nothing around me that I have to really perform for.
100%. So I was coaching a leader who was 25, 26 years in, who was contemplating, was retiring in a month. The biggest thing that they kept talking about and saying, when I wake up on, say it was January 1st was their retirement date. When I wake up on January 1st, who am I? What do I do? I've been, and that exact same thing you're talking about, I've been told I know what my expectations are. I know what I'm supposed to do. I go into work on Monday at 8 a.m. I have these accomplishments I have to make. And they were really going through that thought process of when I actually wake up on Monday morning and I don't have somewhere to go, I don't have somebody telling me where to be, I don't have expectations to meet, what do I do?
What answer did you give me?
Yeah. What did you say?
That's why we're here.
That's the hidden beauty. It's like, I don't even have to give him an answer.
Time out. If he answers that could be the end of our podcast.
Good point. Just ask another question.
So I wish if I'd be sitting on a beach somewhere retired if I had that answer for everybody.
But would you be retired?
Be redirected.
Good answer. Thank you.
That's what we talked through. So what interests you? What sounds fun? What are those things that you think back to when you were doing this work and you couldn't do certain things? What would be fun? What would you like to do? And we explored that. So just like you all have been doing, and I think you do that a lot in this podcast as I've heard it, you're talking through that stuff. Brainstorming, and Dale, you've talked like in your job, right? You do brainstorming ideas and you say, let's just come up with a bunch of ideas and then we'll get clarity on what we want to do. All we're doing, whether it's coaching, therapy, is giving people that space to pause and talk about those things. You guys talk about journaling, whether it's journaling, meditation, therapy, coaching, talking to a friend or family member. You are talking those things out and trying to get some clarity on, and I call it facilitating clarity. All you're trying to do is help that person talk through it enough to get some idea of what they want to do and what that next step is.
Yeah, there is no easy button answer to the question. It's holistic, it's broad spectrum, it's individualistic. That the answer to the question is, who am I? What's my identity? That's a journey. There's no one sentence answer for that. Is that fair to say?
100%. That's why I appreciate you guys calling this the redirect versus retire. Mm-hmm. Everything is part of that story. Everything is part of that journey. There's very few things other than death and some other things, but there's very few things that are a finite, it is over. And now we are stopping, restarting, and going.
So would you recommend somebody who's heading toward retirement to look back on your life and just kind of do this autobiography of yourself, your story, to help get to that point, to help get to the understanding what my identity is?
Yeah. So you can look at the past and regret it, or say, what are those strengths and skills I have? I think if
or both.
Absolutely. Right? Yeah. What do I wish I would have done? So you can use those negatives too. Absolutely. And what are those positives that I have in this skill set? I think we've talked when we've had some of those conversations. You have great experiences of throughout your career and building a company and doing all those things. That knowledge doesn't go away when you retire.
Right.
And I think that's why I like what you guys have said about the redirect.
Bring it forward.
Yeah. Because it's still you. Your job has changed. You have retired, but it's still you and all those experiences you have.
I think people's lives are a big puzzle, and time, life experiences, personality traits, things that happen to you, choices you make, all make out the timeline or the puzzle that is this timeline of your life. And that's the way I look at it. And I think this topic in your profession specifically is one of the most fascinating things to me. I like trying to build systems for organizations, but I really love unpacking people. What is it you're experiencing, and how did that get there? How did that piece to the puzzle end up on the board? What is it about life that brought that to you? Mm-hmm. And what did that do to you or do for you? That stuff is so fascinating to me. As it relates to retirement, and specifically as it relates to transition, what advice would you give us about helping people navigate that transition?
Yeah. I don't know if I'll have perfect advice or like, oh, this is going to be, check this off and you got it. I really think what you all are doing in terms of talking about it as redirecting and giving people that space to talk about it. I've heard different stories you've had on here. Mm-hmm. That's telling stories and saying, all right, where do I go? I really think the mindset, if you, during your career, you have redirects throughout. During life, going to high school, going to college, starting a family, a divorce, whatever, there's tons of redirects. I think looking at this as this is me continuing, let's think what's fun, what I enjoy, what would be something that adds value and meaning for me. Impact and meaning are something that is crucial for people. I don't care where you are in your life. And that's all you're doing here is helping people figure out what's that meaning I have, what's my next step. And I've heard even you guys talking about some of like the long-term planning, some of that retirement throughout your career, like what do I do when I retire? How will I have enough money? When does that happen? That's a lot of stuff that can feel overwhelming. One of the other things that I think if I was talking to somebody about retirement, what's that next step? So a lot of times it's overwhelming to say, what are those 18 things I have to do to get to that perfect place that I want to be? A lot of times it's as simple as, what's that next step? My organization I work in is going through a lot of change right now. And one of the philosophies I heard recently was it's a person lost in the woods and they're walking and they're trying to find out how to get out of the woods and they're looking way ahead and they see all these trees. I'm like, I don't know, if I go a mile that way, it looks like, who knows if it's a cliff or a river, who knows where to go. And a philosopher comes next to him and says, if you can you see the ground in front of you? And they're like, yeah. I'm like, all right, then you know where your next step is. At times it's slowing people down from that anxiety, that pressure of where I need to go 10, 15 years from now and looking at that next step.
Time for a quick break. If you're liking what you're hearing, do us a quick favor. Hit that follow button, share it with your friends and family, drop us a quick comment, and then a 5-star review. It really helps us keep going and growing. Then head over to Instagram and follow us there too. Thanks for the help. And now let's get back to work. I like that. The visual, I need an illustrator to really help me write a children's book or something for adults. That it's a path through the woods where beside the path and in front of you it is dark because you cannot see it. All you can see is the light that you have with you, shedding light on the path that you have, and the path behind you is still lit. If that illustration makes sense. As you go forward, you continue to light the path in front of you. Additional help and community might make your light a little brighter and help you see a little further and see the other world around you. But all you can do is take the step in front of you. And that you keep taking those steps, and that leads to life.
Mm-hmm. The only thing I'll challenge you on,
please,
just from there's no path. So that would be easy. And I think that's where you get the anxiety and the concerns about retirement or a job or any part of your life.
You don't even know if you're on a path.
There just isn't a path. It's you figuring out where you want to go. And so I think that's part of the...
I like your illustration better. I like that.
But that's part of that's the challenge. That's why people struggle with it, which makes complete sense. I was talking to somebody recently about job and career and like in the corporate world, is that where you wanted to be? Do we want to... Nobody knows where you can even start or what that would have led to. So I think we don't give ourselves enough credit that there's not a clear path that like, oh, if I do this, then I'll clearly hit that. Everything is unknown and there is no path, and it's what happened and what you created versus a path that you just followed.
And I'll go to the thing that you talked about earlier, Adam, that you can only make those decisions based on what you know and what you've got in front of the information you have. And you've got to bring your A game. You got to bring the curiosity, the desire to learn, everything that made that path behind you. Those are the tools you got to take those steps forward, I think.
This is obviously it's very heady. And I did a little research on psychology and transition and retirement, and they said, of course, it's very emotional, it's very cognitive. We've talked about identity. They throw out routine. They talk about, you mentioned grief and loss, anxiety and worry, loneliness, isolation. Here we're in a corporate world. We're always in meetings and we're in front of customers, and then we're just sitting in our den, later on. And then there was one that just hit me like a brick in the head, shifting from accumulation to decumulation. Have you thought about that, Dale? That you were making money, and now you're not making money.
Now I'm taking money.
Yeah, you're
everything that I do, and there's a guilt to that.
Right.
Holy cow, there's a guilt to that.
So if there's no path, and I saw this like, okay, I've been accumulating over the years, and now I'm decumulating, and I've never done that in my life before.
Dale,
to answer you, Adam, that was my worth. There was my worth.
Was acquiring.
Was providing a life for family. Future families, building up equity, ultimately, and all of a sudden it's like you stop doing that. Now I'm actually pulling from the pot. There's nothing wrong with it because everybody's looking at me going, you so deserve this. You've built these companies, these families. All of a sudden you go back to all those positives and you have to stop. And many people have said, look at the things you've done. And literally, I haven't thought about that. I'm thinking about, I'm going to start draining the pot that I built up.
Your safety net is now starting to come apart,
and you're no longer providing into it.
And I blind my eyes to the stock market, and say, okay, I'm not going to change. I'm taking the long view, but holy cow, that's a big deal. To your point, Kipp.
Yeah, no, I think all those things you're talking about is why it is so difficult, so challenging, and stressful. Going from provider, giver to taker, which I hadn't thought about that till you said that, and kind of heard you articulate that. That's a challenge.
And I see my boys; they're in the accumulation phase. My two sons,
very natural.
I'm watching them build up.
I got an idea. You have them buy you stuff, and then that way you don't spend your money.
What do you think the expectation is, Curt? all I'm asking is to be put in a really nice old people's home. Okay, that's
it's a senior living community.
Senior living community.
Definitely not
I'm
sorry.
Mine will be a facility with locked doors.
Yeah. Kurt, you're talking about the fear or the anxiety of the you have a set amount, and that's what you have, and now it's a limited resource.
Yeah.
All those,
But so is life.
Yeah.
It's a limited resource.
Yeah.
And you have to embrace it. You know, I chatted with my financial guy this week, and he made a comment to me. He's like, I said, you know, I wasn't going to bother you when the world was falling apart with the tariff thing and all this stuff, and I'm sure you were inundated with calls. And he's like, yeah. I said, so anything I need to be worried about? He's like, no, you're doing fine. Don't focus on this stuff.
It'll run its course.
And then he said the same thing. You've worked hard. You got yourself to a point. You're fine. Just enjoy it. Don't get crazy, but enjoy it. But that's so hard for me to actually do because I was in that other role for so long that I have a difficult time. You know, I feel fine now, but in 2 weeks, I might be, oh my gosh, I got to go get a part-time job.
And that's a constant unknown. Who knows? And that's why. And I heard you. I think I listened to the mortality podcast, and I heard you say, like, you don't know when.
Yeah.
So it is a constant. We've all had different health scares, and it's like you can think about the future and planning and being really delayed gratification, and then it's also how much do you delay gratification. It's so many choices every day, which is why I think it's just so challenging, and why the mind and people are so fascinating, because everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different comfort zone. Everybody, when they're going to retire, is having different. Some might say, you're talking about meetings. Some people, thank God, I don't have to go to another meeting. I am so glad. I do not want to be around those anymore. I am so glad to go home and be by myself. And others crave it. And I mean, there's just such variability and
I
differences.
mean, I don't miss the task of the meetings, but I miss the people in the meetings. And, you know, I had a contact list of hundreds of people that I dealt with often.
Yeah.
And now it's crickets.
Yep.
But I got to figure it out. So I'm finding new friends,
Right.
you know, and Kipp, you know, it's nice to know you personally, and maybe you'll get to know me professionally.
I think gratitude. You know, there's a lot of focus on taking every day and really kind of listing out what are you grateful for, you know, and what are people grateful for you, you know, why are they grateful for the things you've done? I think you got to take stock in that. I think almost daily to really, really understand and how lucky and how fortunate we really are in the situations that we're in, where we think, oh my gosh, maybe the sky's falling in. Oh my gosh, take a breath.
Yeah, take a beat.
Take a beat, and you know, and just look at you've got a life. Do something with it. That's our line at the end of our podcast. Is like, you know, find your purpose, then go do something about it. But it's taking that step, and that's a big deal when you've had a completely different identity when it's been around work. There's nobody there to pat you on the back anymore.
Yeah, so as it relates to transition, namely as I think as we're transitioning from career into life after career, I think we've beat up or massaged the topic well of identity, but then all of the other unknowns, navigating from the structure, you know, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, meetings, purpose, goals, all of these things, that was that scaffolding around the way time passed by. That's all gone. I think we've helped people identify the idea that you are more than what you did, and you know, you get to choose what's interesting to you, what are you passionate about, all of that stuff. But then there's a lot of other aspects to that transition as it relates to what I do with my time. How do I structure my day? What is important to me? We've had recent episodes about how to orient yourself inside your household with your spouse and the like. There's a lot of bits and pieces to it. Kipp, give us some insight on the right way to go into some of these transitional considerations, set the course for navigating some of that.
So I'm going to...
Generally speaking, of course.
Yeah, no. I mean, because your wording was, what's the right thing to do? There is no right thing. So I think that's part of the first conversation I have with anybody. there is this, tell me the right answer. What's the right thing to do?
That's what frustrates me about you guys. I'm so sorry.
Just tell me
Tell me what to do.
Right. Oh, and I hear that all the time. But this is why it's unique from person. What it would be for each of the three of you, and I've heard it just from the conversations you've had, it's different. It is a different thing that the three of you would want. The right thing, I mean, if you want to say it, the right thing is what works for you, and part of that is figuring out, at least from what you know right now, what is that? What does that look like? But what type of transition do you want to have? Same person I'm thinking about, talking about the retirement, it was training and mentoring the person who's succeeding for them, and that was their big part. They were really proud of what they did, and they wanted to figure out how to be an effective mentor so that the team is in a good spot once they leave. So that was very
planning.
specific.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
So I'm not going to give you, sorry for not giving you the
You're terrible.
answer.
Yeah, really. I wanted answers.
Yeah. But I think your point is so well made, Kipp, because I'm looking at the three of us and what we've talked about and how we're approaching it, and we're all over the board on this.
Two things. I think in terms of the right thing to do is exactly what you all are doing. You intentionally talk about it. You are thoughtful. You're considering different points of view and perspectives. And that is, I think, the right thing to do.
Okay.
Two, you have experienced many transitions like this throughout your life already. And it's not, the retirement label is new.
It's a new
transition is not.
We had one guest come on that talked about sitting in it. What are some click words that as you sit in it, you should be asking yourself?
It's a good question. I'll
Thank
think through I'll think through the click words. I'd rewind and listen to what you all said when you're going through those different situations and why you went into therapy at those different points. That is you sitting in it. I heard you talking in the conversation with Mike about just a need to, and it's hard to do that. It's easy to rub dirt on it, I think was the quote you guys said. And it's much harder, I think Mike said, to sit in it and deal with it. It is really easy to ignore what's going on and ignore the challenges and pretend it's not there. Facing the reality of whatever you're anxious about, curious about, thinking about is the thing to do.
Avoidance is not processing.
I'm thinking, and the word that came up to me is just being honest. It's just being honest with yourself, your feelings, your concerns, your right. I mean, running away from it is saying they don't exist. What we do, because we bury it. I'm with you. I suppress. Oh my gosh, I'm a suppressor. I just barreled through to get to the next thing, and I think that's a learned behavior that becomes, a problem later on if you don't learn how to deal with it.
So the old dog, can we get new tricks? I mean, can we fix things? Can we make ourselves better?
I'll challenge the word fix things again too.
Oh, there we go again. Is there a couch here someplace? I gotta lay down.
Sitting on it, man.
Words are important. So fix it assumes something was broken. It was an experience you went through, and I think that's part of the grace. That's part of it. Fixing it means it was broken, and you needed to do something about it. You can learn from things that you didn't do as well as you could, but each experience is an experience that is a learning. You talk about it in an organization, you talk about it as people. Everything you do, a bad boss can be a great learning for you because you figure out what to do.
Yep.
A bad experience can be a great learning for you on, that didn't feel good, what do I need to do differently? So there isn't a fix, and I don't think there needs to be. And I don't think that's being too pie in the sky.
No, that's what you do. I mean,
You sound so disgusted by that.
No, I'm actually in awe.
Yeah.
Because you hear the words that come out of my mouth, and then you challenge the words that I use. And I use the words so freely that all of a sudden you say back to me, you can't fix it. And I'm like, well, you're right. Why did I say the word fix?
Yeah, unpack it, reshape it.
And if I have to think about everything I say, I'm never going to leave a room.
Yeah. And I think I really, really like who I am.
We like you too. Ed.
Thanks. And me was built by all of the things that happened around me, to me, with me. All of the things that I would, if I could write my life out, I would not have written a bunch of those things in. I would not wish upon others some of the things that I went through. That's true for all of us, right? Things happen to us that you wouldn't wish for other people. But those things made me. Those things made me who I am. And to take out some of the things that I wish weren't in my past would be remaking me. Mm-hmm. And I like who I am.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I always use this statement with my wife. I was talking about, boy, I wish I got to know the Lord earlier in my life. I wish I was that leader at the dinner table when my kids were younger to talk about devotions and lead prayer and to talk about God more. And she says, Curt, don't bang yourself up because that's your journey.
Yeah. And
you have that journey to tell someone else about. So you lived it. So you now know the value of it. So talk about it. And I think we do suppress or we do not want to talk about the dirty laundry, but the dirty laundry is what we live in probably a lot.
There is I'm sorry, I'm going to bring this up. This is a little bit off, but there is a book out there that was written by a gentleman who had a speech disfluency, and my son has a speech disfluency.
That's funny that you stuttered on that word.
And it was so powerful because the realization of this person who stuttered throughout their life, and wanting to change and then realized finally that's who I am. And in that moment, massive, I am not me unless I'm stuttering or I have my speech disfluency. Yeah. And accepting that and getting to that point, all of a sudden that was who the person is. And we bring forward all those experiences that we've had. And you saying, Adam, wow, you know what? I'm everything that I've experienced. Without him, I'm not me. And that came out in this book that it was just fascinating experience because it was a really, really hard life. And I've watched my son deal with it, and he's done so well. When I had so much fear for what things might happen, he just ran over everything in his way and accepted it. Malcolm
Gladwell wrote a book, David and Goliath, and it's really, really good. He talks about how the very thing that looked to be David's disadvantage was his advantage. And one of the points he makes, and he's so good at tying things that seem disconjointed to prove his point. And forgive me if I have the stat wrong, so don't fact check me. Is 2/3 of the Fortune 500 CEOs are dyslexic.
Oh yeah.
And what makes them crazy good at what they do or uniquely capable is all of the hard work and all of the effort that they had to put into success because they had to overcome their deficiency. Mm-hmm. And that extra effort to overcome their deficiency is what made them better options than other people at their careers.
How they use that to make them stronger.
Yeah.
And so the bottom line lesson for us is, first of all, we are who our experiences were, and we bring that forward into whatever transition we're going through to recognize those things, especially in retirement, as we're looking at those gifts that are us being brought forward.
So let me say this so that you don't have to, Kipp. Well, I think our time is up now. And is this going to be a bill that's going to be times 3 because 3 of us are here? So,
of course.
What's your billable rate per hour?
Curt just invited you on to get free counseling behind the microphone.
Yeah. I'd love to extend an invitation to you that, thank you again for coming here and just having us process transition and process where we are and what we're doing as people. And thank you for all the wonderful things you said about what we're doing with the Redirect podcast. But we would love to have you as sort of, we're not experts. Dale, Adam, and I, we're just three guys behind a microphone having a conversation about things that happen in our life. And you have this knowledge and this ability to listen to people and really bring out great things for us to think about. And psychology is so big in this whole retirement component for our audience. Would you be willing to come back on, not necessarily every other week, but on occasion? Would you be willing to do that for us?
Yeah, no, this is fun. I think this is a good chance to.
Excellent.
Yeah.
So he'd be the guy. Who's the guy in the NFL?
Gene Steratore.
He's our Gene Steratore.
That's right. Yeah, the rules.
Throw the flag.
The rules
Explain the flag.
But who doesn't give you answers? So.
Yeah.
But you know what? That's the beauty of it.
Yeah. He can give his opinion, but he's not making the call. But we need a pro, and you're the best pro.
Kip, anything you want to say on the way out the door?
No, appreciate it. Again, I think having these conversations is what's fun. Hearing different things people are talking about, the questions being asked. That's why I like this role that I do. I call it collaborative expertise. I have some expertise in what I do, and psychology, organization development, those types of things. But then talking with people who have expertise on what works for them, what their situations are. That's that collaboration. That's the fun piece. So I had fun with the conversation. Thanks for making it easy on me.
Thanks for joining us.
Yep.
Catch you next time on the Redirect podcast.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Redirect Podcast. We would like to thank the University of Cincinnati 1819 Innovation Hub for allowing us to record our episodes at the eSports Innovation Lab recording studio. Don't forget to tell your friends about the Redirect Podcast and have them follow us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Instagram. Want more information? Do you have a question for Curt, Dale, or Adam? Or would you like us to consider a topic that interests you for a future podcast? Send us an email at info@redirect-u.com. Remember, the journey isn't over. It's just redirecting. There's purpose in your life. Find it and do something about it.